The clatter of fine silver masked the subtle click of a gun cocking, but the sudden chill in the air was unmistakable. A stranger's heavy hand clamped over mine, his voice a low, gravelly rasp against my ear. "You're in danger. Pretend I'm your dad." Moments later, my entire world burned down. The Sterling Cut was the kind of Boston steakhouse where a single dinner cost more than my monthly rent. It smelled of aged oak, seared prime rib, and the sharp, expensive bite of Macallan 25. At 23, I, Clara Hayes, was merely a ghost in a crisp white blouse and a black pencil skirt, navigating the dimly lit dining room with practiced invisibility. It was 11:45 p.m. on a Tuesday. The dinner rush had thinned into the lingering, low-voiced conversations of politicians, hedge fund managers, and men who wore bespoke suits but had eyes like wolves. I was exhausted, my feet aching against the hardwood floors, counting down the minutes until my shift ended. Then, he walked in. The maître d' practically tripped over his own feet to accommodate the new arrival. The man didn't just walk into the room, he consumed it. He appeared to be in his early 40s, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal gray suit that draped flawlessly over a muscular frame. His hair was dark, dusted with silver at the temples, and his face was a portrait of harsh, aristocratic angles, a sharp jaw, a Roman nose, and piercing hazel eyes that swept the room with the cold calculation of a predator assessing its territory. He wasn't alone. Two men flanked him, one built like a middle linebacker, the other lean and sharp-eyed. But it was the man in the center who commanded the oxygen. Table 7. "Clara," my manager hissed, shoving a silver tray of water glasses into my hands. "Don't mess up. That's Dominic Rossi." The name sent a phantom shiver down my spine. Even in a city insulated by old money and blue-collar pride, the Rossi family name carried a dark, whispered weight. They weren't street thugs. They were a corporate syndicate, dealing in shipping ports, real estate, and things the police were paid very well to look away from. I nodded, keeping my eyes down as I approached the velvet-lined booth. "Good evening, gentlemen." Bottled or sparkling. Dominic Rossi didn't look at the glasses. He looked at me. His gaze was heavy, analytical, and unsettlingly intense. "Still is fine," he murmured. His voice was a rich, dark baritone that seemed to vibrate right through the table. As I reached across to set his glass down, my wrist brushed the cuff of his jacket. I flinched, whispering a quick apology, but he didn't pull away. He simply watched my face, his eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to place where he had seen me before. I hurried away to check on my other tables, my heart hammering an uneven rhythm against my ribs. 10 minutes passed. I was balancing a tray of dirty plates near the front entrance when the atmosphere of the restaurant violently shifted. The heavy mahogany doors swung open, and 3 men walked in. They didn't have reservations. They didn't wait for the maître d'. The man in the lead wore a long, tan trench coat, his face scarred and his eyes devoid of anything remotely human. I didn't know his name, but my instincts screamed at me to run. He scanned the room, his dead eyes locking onto me. Before I could even process the threat, a large shadow eclipsed my vision. Dominic Rossi had crossed the dining room with terrifying speed. He didn't run. He glided, slipping between the tables until he was standing directly in front of me, blocking the trench-coated man's line of sight. Dominic's large, calloused hand wrapped smoothly around my forearm. The heat of his grip was shocking. I opened my mouth to protest, to ask what he was doing, but he leaned in, invading my personal space. His cheek brushed against my temple, the scent of cedarwood and gunpowder flooding my senses. "Smile at me," Dominic whispered, his lips grazing my ear. "You're in danger. Pretend I'm your dad." My brain short-circuited. "Dad? Do it, Clara. Now," he commanded softly, the authority in his tone absolute. He knew my name. Pure survival instinct took the wheel. I forced a brilliant, beaming smile onto my face, dropping my voice to a pitch of feigned delight. "Dad, I didn't know you were coming to town." I threw my free arm around his waist, hugging him. Beneath his tailored suit, his body was like forged steel. Dominic chuckled a rich, booming, fatherly sound that was Oscar-worthy. Wanted to surprise my girl, he said loudly, wrapping a heavy arm around my shoulders. He smoothly pivoted us, keeping my body shielded from the men at the front. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the man in the trench coat reach inside his coat. Dominic's grip tightened on my shoulder, his fingers digging into my collarbone. "Walk," he muttered, his fatherly facade dropping instantly. "Do not look back. Head for the kitchen doors." We moved. His 2 bodyguards had materialized behind us, forming a human wall. As we hit the swinging doors of the kitchen, the first gunshot rang out. The sound was deafening, shattering the upscale quiet. Screams erupted. Porcelain shattered. Dominic shoved me hard through the kitchen doors. "Move! Out the back!" he roared over the chaos. Cooks and dishwashers dove for the floor as we sprinted past the stoves. Dominic never let go of my hand, hauling me toward the loading dock doors. We burst into the freezing Boston night, the damp alley air hitting my lungs like glass. A black armored SUV was already idling, its tires smoking against the asphalt. "Get in," Dominic ordered, practically throwing me into the back seat. He dove in after me just as the back doors of the restaurant burst open. Bullets sparked against the brick wall and pinged off the SUV's reinforced glass. The driver slammed the gas, and the heavy vehicle tore out of the alley, throwing me violently against Dominic's chest. I was hyperventilating, my hands trembling so violently I couldn't form a fist. The world had just turned upside down in less than 3 minutes, and the man holding me against him in the dark was a Mafia boss. The city lights blurred into long streaks of gold and red as the SUV merged onto the highway, putting miles between us and the smoking wreckage of my normal life. The silence in the back of the car was suffocating, broken only by the hum of the engine and the ragged sound of my own breathing. I pushed myself away from Dominic's chest, pressing my back against the opposite door. What I choked on the word, my throat bone dry. What just happened? Who were those men? Why did they shoot at us? Dominic adjusted his cuffs, his demeanor terrifyingly calm for a man who had just been in a shootout. "They weren't shooting at us, Clara. They were shooting at you." The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. "Me? I'm a waitress. I serve steaks and clear plates. I don't even have a parking ticket." I pressed my hands to my temples, feeling a hysterical laugh bubbling in my throat. "You're Dominic Rossi. You're a mobster. They were there for you, and I just got caught in the crossfire." "The man in the trench coat is Silas Mercer," Dominic said quietly, ignoring my accusation. "He's a retrieval specialist for the Moreno Syndicate out of Chicago. Silas doesn't do crossfire, Clara. He does targeted acquisitions. He walked into that restaurant with a photo of your face." "Why?" I screamed, the panic finally breaking through. "Why would the Chicago mob want me?" Dominic leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His hazel eyes locked onto mine, devoid of any warmth. "Because of your father. My father is dead," I snapped back. "He died in a car crash when I was 4. Your stepfather died in a car crash," Dominic corrected smoothly. "Your biological father is William Hayes, and until 3 weeks ago, William was the lead forensic accountant for the Moreno family. He cooked their books, laundered their money through offshore shell companies in the Caymans, and kept the feds off their backs. Then, he vanished. I stared at him, my mind spinning. I haven't seen William Hayes since I was an infant. My mother took me and left him because he was a drunk. I don't know anything about him. The Morenos don't care," Dominic said, his voice lowering, taking on an edge of dangerous intimacy. "William didn't just run. He took something with him. A ledger. Hard drives containing the routing numbers for nearly $300 million in cartel assets. The Morenos are bleeding, and they know William will do anything to protect his bloodline. You aren't a target, Clara. You're leverage. Silas was sent to kidnap you, put a gun to your head on a live video feed, and force William to hand over the drives." The blood drained from my face. The cold reality of the situation crashed over me, paralyzing my limbs. "And you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Why did you save me? Out of the goodness of your heart?" Dominic laughed, but it was a dark, humorless sound. "I am a businessman, Clara, I don't deal in charity. The Morenos are moving into my territory. If they get those drives back, they have the capital to fund a war against my family here in Boston. But if I get William Hayes and those drives, the Morenos fall. I saved you because you are the bait I need to draw your father out before Silas finds him. My stomach dropped into a bottomless pit. I wasn't rescued. I was just traded from one monster to another. You're kidnapping me. I am keeping you breathing, Dominic replied, leaning back against the leather seat. There is a distinct difference. If Silas had taken you, you'd be sitting in a soundproof basement missing your fingernails by morning. With me, you will be a guest. A prisoner, I spat. A survivor, he countered. The SUV slowed, turning off a rural, unlit road and approaching a massive pair of wrought iron gates. They swung open, revealing a sprawling, modern stone estate hidden deep within the dense woods of Weston. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, their silhouettes sharp against the floodlights. The car came to a halt. The driver got out and opened my door. I hesitated, looking out at the fortress. It was beautiful, but it was a cage. Come, Clara, Dominic said, stepping out of the opposite side and walking around to me. He extended a hand. I glared at his hand, then up at his face. And what if I run? Dominic stepped closer, completely invading my space once more. The air between us cracked with sudden, undeniable tension. He reached out, not to grab my arm, but to gently tuck a stray lock of hair behind my ear. The touch was completely incongruous with the ruthless man he claimed to be. It was soft, possessive. If you run, Clara, Silas Mercer will find you, Dominic murmured, his eyes dropping to my lips for a fraction of a second before meeting my gaze. And if Silas doesn't, I will. Either way, you belong to me until this is over. He pulled his hand back, shrugging off his heavy suit jacket and draping it over my shivering shoulders. The warmth of his body heat enveloped me, smelling of that intoxicating cedarwood. Let's go inside, he said. Wrapping his jacket tighter around myself, I stepped out into the cold night, following the Mafia boss into his fortress, knowing that the real danger hadn't ended in that restaurant. It had only just begun. The morning sun did nothing to warm the sprawling, sterile beauty of the Weston estate. I woke up in a bed the size of my entire apartment, wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets that felt like a second skin. For a brief, disorienting second, I thought the events at the Sterling Cut were a nightmare. Then I saw Dominic Rossi's charcoal gray suit jacket draped over the velvet armchair in the corner, a stark reminder of the violence that had brought me here. I dressed in the clothes someone had left at the foot of the bed, a pair of dark, tailored slacks and a cream silk blouse that fit perfectly. Too perfectly. It sent a fresh wave of unease through me. Dominic hadn't just known my face. He had known my measurements. When I finally navigated the labyrinth of hallways to the main dining room, I found him. Dominic was seated at the head of a massive mahogany table, a tablet in one hand and a cup of black coffee in the other. In the harsh daylight, the silver at his temples gleamed, and the harsh lines of his face seemed even more pronounced. He wasn't wearing a suit jacket today, just a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing thick forearms corded with muscle and a dark, intricate tattoo of a raven sprawling across his left wrist. Standing behind him was a man I hadn't seen the night before. He was older, perhaps in his 60s, with a posture as rigid as an iron rod and eyes like chipped flint. Sit, Clara, Dominic commanded without looking up from his screen. I took the chair furthest from him, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Am I allowed to ask questions, or is my role just to sit here and wait until my biological father decides to care about me? Dominic's finger paused on the tablet. He set it down slowly, his hazel eyes locking onto mine with a weight that made it hard to breathe. You have fire. That's good. You'll need it to survive the coming week. He gestured to the older man. This is Harrison. He is my head of security. He will be your shadow. Harrison gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod. Miss Hayes. Here is how this works, Dominic continued, leaning forward, resting his elbows on the polished wood. The air in the room seemed to condense, pulling me into his orbit. The rules of the estate. Asterisk. Perimeter. You do not leave the main house without Harrison or myself. The woods are wired, and my men are instructed to shoot anything they don't recognize. Asterisk. Communications. Your phone is gone. You will not use the internet. The Morenos have hackers who can trace an IP address back to this estate in under 90 seconds. Asterisk. Compliance. When I tell you to move, you move. If I tell you to hide, you hide. You do not question me when we are in the open, and what happens if I refuse? I challenged, my voice shaking just enough to betray my bravado. Dominic didn't yell. He didn't slam his fist. He simply stood up, the sheer mass of him casting a shadow over the table. He walked over to me, each step deliberate, until he was standing right beside my chair. He leaned down, placing a hand on the back of my seat, his face inches from mine. If you refuse, Clara, you won't live long enough to regret it, he whispered, the scent of cedar and dark roast coffee enveloping me. I am not your captor because I enjoy your company. I am keeping you alive because your pulse is the only leverage I have. Do not mistake my protection for patience. He held my gaze for a long, agonizing moment. My heart hammered against my ribs, caught between terror and a dark, confusing pull towards the man. There was a raw, unfiltered danger to him, but also a strange, heavy anchor of safety. Eat your breakfast, he finally said, stepping back. We have a fitting for you this afternoon. Tomorrow night, we are going to a charity gala at the Copley Bastion. It's time to let the Morenos know exactly who has the prize. As he walked out, leaving me alone with Harrison, a young maid in a black uniform hurried in to clear his plates. As she leaned over the table, her hand brushed mine. I almost pulled away, but I felt the distinct shape of something hard and rectangular being pressed into my palm. I froze. The maid didn't look at me, keeping her eyes downcast as she swept out of the room. Beneath the table, my fingers curled around a small, heavy piece of metal. A burner phone. The bathroom attached to my suite had the water running for 20 minutes before I finally gathered the courage to turn the phone on. It was a cheap, disposable model, completely out of place in the marble-lined bathroom. As soon as the screen flickered to life, it buzzed in my hand. One text message. Clara, it's your father. Reply when you are alone. My breath hitched. William Hayes. The ghost who had abandoned me, the man who had dragged the Chicago mob to my doorstep. My thumbs trembled as I typed back. I am alone. Who gave you this number? The phone rang instantly. I answered, pressing it hard against my ear. Clara! A voice rasped. It sounded old, tired, and laced with panic. Thank God. Listen to me. You have to get out of there. Dominic Rossi is going to kill you. You don't get to act like a concerned parent. I hissed, tears of anger and fear pricking my eyes. You brought the mob to my restaurant. People were shooting at me. I know. And I am so sorry, William pleaded. But you don't understand who you're dealing with. Rossi isn't just trying to stop the Morenos. He wants the ledger I took because it contains the names of dirty politicians he wants to blackmail to take over the entire East Coast. He's using you as bait to draw me out. The moment I hand over the drives, he will execute us both to tie up loose ends. And Silas Mercer? I demanded. The man who tried to kidnap me? Silas is a monster, yes, but he's a mercenary. I've bought his contract. William lied smoothly, or at least, I prayed he was lying. I've paid Silas double what the Morenos were paying him. He works for me now. He's going to extract you. Extract me? I echoed, my blood running cold. Tomorrow night. The gala at the Copley Bastion, William said urgently. Rossi's security will be focused outward. At 10 p.m., go to the ladies' lounge on the second floor. Silas will be waiting by the service elevator. Clara, please. It's our only chance. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my reflection in the vanity mirror looking like a stranger. A waitress from Southie, caught in a war between a father she didn't know and a Mafia boss who terrified her. The next evening, the tension in the estate was suffocating. The dress Dominic had provided was a breathtaking, floor-length gown of midnight blue silk. It clung to my curves, leaving my back entirely bare. A diamond necklace, heavy and cold, rested against my collarbone. Dominic looked devastating in a bespoke tuxedo. His Sig Sauer P. 226 seamlessly concealed beneath the tailoring. As he helped me into the back of his armored Maybach, his hand lingered on the bare skin of my lower back. The touch sent a jolt of electricity straight to my core. "You look beautiful," he murmured, his voice dropping an octave. "I look like bait," I replied, refusing to look at him. He caught my chin, his fingers firm but surprisingly gentle, forcing me to meet his eyes. "You are safe with me, Clara. I swear it on my life." The conviction in his voice made my chest tighten. I thought about the burner phone hidden in my clutch. Was he lying? Was my father lying? The Copley Bastion was a fortress of Boston's elite, overflowing with champagne, string quartets, and glittering socialites. For 2 hours, Dominic played the perfect escort. He kept a proprietary hand on the small of my back, guiding me through the crowd, introducing me as an associate. His bodyguards, including Harrison, formed a discreet, impenetrable perimeter. At 9:55 p.m., panic began to claw at my throat. I had to make a choice. Trust the devil I knew, or the father I didn't. "I need to use the restroom," I whispered to Dominic. His eyes scanned the room, cold and calculating. He nodded to Harrison. "Harrison will escort you to the door." My heart pounded a frantic rhythm as I climbed the grand staircase to the second floor, Harrison 2 steps behind me. The ladies' lounge was an opulent room of velvet chaises and gilded mirrors. I pushed through the doors, leaving Harrison in the hallway. The room was empty. I walked past the sinks, heading toward the back alcove where the service corridor was located. The heavy oak door was slightly ajar. I checked my watch. 10:01 p.m. I pushed the door open, stepping into the dim, utilitarian hallway. "Hello, Clara," a raspy voice echoed. It wasn't Silas Mercer. It was a man I recognized from the restaurant, one of the thugs who had walked in with Silas. He stepped out from the shadows, raising a suppressed pistol, pointing it directly at my chest. "Your dad sends his regards," the thug sneered. "Turns out, Rossi cares a little too much about you. He won't trade the drives while you're breathing. The Morenos decided a dead daughter is better leverage to break William's spirit." My father hadn't bought Silas's contract. He hadn't sent them to rescue me. My father had set me up. The burner phone was a trap. I backed up, a scream tearing at my throat, but the thug stepped forward, his finger tightening on the trigger. The door behind me violently burst off its hinges. Dominic didn't enter the hallway. He erupted into it like a force of nature. He moved with a terrifying, fluid violence. The thug swung his weapon, but Dominic was already there. He grabbed the man's wrist, snapping it with a sickening crack. The suppressed gun clattered to the floor. Dominic didn't hesitate. He drove his knee into the man's ribs, followed by a brutal, crushing blow to the side of the thug's head that sent him crashing to the concrete floor, unconscious before he landed. I was trembling violently, pressed flat against the wall. Dominic spun toward me, his chest heaving, his tuxedo jacket torn. The calm, composed Mafia boss was gone, replaced by something wild and lethal. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands gripping my shoulders, searching my face frantically. He was going to kill me," I sobbed, the adrenaline finally breaking my composure. "My father set me up. He told me to come here." Dominic's expression hardened into absolute fury. He pulled me against his chest, wrapping his arms around me in an iron grip. I buried my face in his shirt, clutching the lapels of his ruined tuxedo. "I told you," Dominic whispered fiercely into my hair. "You belong to me, and I protect what is mine." William Hayes just signed his own death warrant. The air in the service hallway of the Copley Bastion was thick with the smell of cordite and the metallic tang of blood. Dominic didn't give me a chance to process the lifeless thug on the floor. He hauled me to my feet, his hand locking around my wrist with the force of a steel vice. "We are leaving now," he growled. We burst through the rear exit stairwell, the heavy fire doors slamming shut behind us, muffling the distant string quartet playing Vivaldi in the ballroom above. We descended into the underground parking garage. Harrison was already there, leaning heavily against the armored Maybach, clutching a bloody wound on his left shoulder. 3 more of Dominic's men were fanned out, Heckler and Koch MP5 submachine guns drawn, scanning the concrete pillars. "Harrison," Dominic barked, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "I'm fine, boss." "Graze," the older man grunted, his face pale but his eyes sharp. They breached the south perimeter. Mercer's men. They knew exactly where the blind spots were. "Because William told them," I whispered, the crushing weight of my father's betrayal finally sinking in. The burner phone in my clutch felt like a lump of radioactive material. I pulled it out with trembling fingers and shoved it into Dominic's chest. "Take it. He gave me this." He lured me to the hallway. Dominic snatched the cheap plastic device, his jaw ticking furiously. He threw me into the back seat of the Maybach, sliding in right behind me as the driver slammed the gas. The tires shrieked against the polished concrete, launching us out into the cold, rain-slicked streets of Boston. We tore down Starro Drive, the lights of the city blurring into frantic neon streaks reflecting off the Charles River. I huddled in the corner of the leather seat, pulling my torn silk dress around my shoulders. I was shivering, not from the cold, but from the bone-deep shock of realizing my own flesh and blood had sold me to a firing squad. Dominic didn't speak. He pulled out a sleek, encrypted satellite phone and dialed a number. "Leo, I have a burner phone. I need you to rip all the data from it. GPS pings, deleted texts, voice logs, everything. Have the extraction ready by the time we hit the Navy Yard safe house." He hung up and finally turned to me. The raw fury in his hazel eyes had dialed back, replaced by a dark, simmering intensity. He reached across the wide seat, pulling me out of the corner and firmly against his chest. I didn't resist. I buried my face in his ruined tuxedo shirt, listening to the steady, powerful rhythm of his heart. "I will kill him for this," Dominic vowed softly, his hand stroking my hair. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise etched in stone. "William Hayes won't live to see the sunrise." Why did he do it? I sobbed quietly. If the Morenos wanted the ledger, why kill me? Why not just trade me for it? "Because William isn't trying to hide from the Morenos, Clara," Dominic murmured, resting his chin on the top of my head. "If he wanted to hide, he wouldn't have stayed in Chicago's blast radius. He wants to take over. Your father isn't a scared accountant. He's a snake who stole the Moreno Syndicate's entire financial foundation. He hired Silas Mercer to eliminate me, using you as the distraction, so he can step in and take my territory on the East Coast." The realization was a punch to the gut. I wasn't leverage. I was a pawn in a coup. 20 minutes later, the Maybach pulled into an abandoned, rusted warehouse on Pier 4 of the Charlestown Navy Yard. The smell of brine, diesel, and decaying wood filled the air. This wasn't the luxurious Weston estate. This was a war room. Inside, Dominic's tech specialist, a brilliant, frantic man named Leo, was already hooked up to a bank of monitors. He snatched the burner phone from Dominic and plugged it into a decryption tower. "Give me 3 minutes, boss," Leo muttered, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Dominic stripped off his torn tuxedo jacket and shoulder holster, throwing them onto a metal table. He walked over to a heavy black Pelican case, snapping the latches open. Inside was an arsenal. He began to systematically load magazines into a sleek black tactical vest. "You're going after him tonight," I said, my voice finally steadying. The tears had stopped. In their place, a cold, hard knot of anger was forming. Dominic paused, a loaded magazine in his hand. He looked at me, taking in my ruined designer gown and barefoot stance. He sent a hit squad to a charity gala. "Clara, he tried to put a bullet in you. Boston is my city. If I wait until morning, I look weak, and weakness in my world is fatal." "Got it!" Leo shouted, spinning around in his chair. I pulled the deleted GPS logs from the burner's background data. The phone pinged a location right before it went dark. It's an old shipping freighter docked at the edge of the Mystic River. It's scheduled to be scrapped tomorrow. Dominic racked the slide of his Sig Sauer P-226. That's where he's holding the drives. That's where he's waiting for Silas to call and tell him I'm dead. He turned to Harrison, who was currently getting his shoulder stitched up by a field medic. Lock her down. Nobody gets in or out of this warehouse until I return. No, I said, stepping forward. The word felt foreign on my tongue, but it rang clear in the cavernous space. Dominic's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? I said no. You aren't leaving me in a warehouse. I walked right up to him, tilting my head back to meet his furious glare. He's my father. He used me. He tried to kill me. If you go in there guns blazing, he'll slip away in the chaos. He always slips away. And what exactly do you propose, Clara? You're a waitress, not a soldier. I'm the bait, I corrected him, my voice devoid of emotion. Silas Mercer was supposed to call him, right? To confirm I was dead or captured. I looked at Leo. Can you spoof Silas's number? Make it look like he's calling my father from this burner phone. Leo nodded slowly. Yeah, I can bounce the signal. Make it look authentic. You call him, I told Dominic. You tell him you killed Silas. You tell him you have me, and you're willing to trade my life for the ledger and his immediate departure from Boston. He's arrogant. He'll think he can outsmart you at the exchange. It pulls him out of the freighter and into the open. Dominic stared at me, a profound shift occurring in his eyes. The protective, almost fatherly facade he had used at the restaurant was completely gone. He was looking at me as an equal, as a partner. It's too dangerous, he rasped, though the hesitation in his voice betrayed him. The only way to end this tonight, I insisted. I reached out, my hand resting flat against the Kevlar covering his chest. I trust you, Dominic. Do you trust me? He let out a heavy breath, his hand coming up to cover mine. If a single bullet comes within 10 feet of you, I am burning this entire city to the ground. He looked at Leo. Make the call. The setup was executed with terrifying precision. An hour later, the rain had turned into a torrential downpour. We stood in the shadow of a rusted gantry crane at the edge of the Mystic River docks. The abandoned freighter loomed in the dark water like a ghost ship. I stood in the open, the cold rain plastering my hair to my face and soaking the ruins of my silk dress. My heart was a jackhammer in my chest. Hidden in the shadows of the shipping containers, 50 yards away, was Dominic, holding a high-powered rifle. Harrison and a dozen of Rossi's best men had formed an invisible perimeter. Headlights cut through the fog. A black SUV rolled down the gravel pier, coming to a halt 20 yards from me. The doors opened. 3 men stepped out. The man in the center wore a heavy wool overcoat. Even in the gloom, I recognized the sharp, patrician features that mirrored my own, William Hayes. Beside him stood the scarred, trench-coated nightmare from the restaurant, Silas Mercer. William looked at me, a cruel, mocking smile twisting his lips. He held a small, silver hard drive up in the rain. Well, well. Clara, William called out over the sound of the storm. I must admit, I'm surprised Rossi actually brought you. He must be getting sentimental in his old age. Where is he? Silas barked, his dead eyes scanning the darkness. Rossi said he was coming alone. I'm right here. A voice echoed from a loudspeaker Leo had rigged to the crane. William laughed. A harsh, grating sound. A sniper perch? How cliché, Dominic. You know, if you pull that trigger, my dead man's switch deletes the offshore accounts. The Moreno money vanishes forever. You get nothing. I don't want the money, William. Dominic's voice boomed, cold and devoid of mercy. I just want you out of my city. Leave the drive on the hood of the car. Take your men and go. The girl is yours. William's smile vanished. Do you really think I care about her? She's a loose end, a biological vulnerability. He turned to Silas. Kill her. Then we flush Rossi out. Silas raised his weapon, pointing it directly at my head. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. I didn't flinch. I didn't close my eyes. I just waited. Crack. The sound of Dominic's rifle shattered the night. But it wasn't aimed at William. The high-caliber round took Silas Mercer dead in the chest. the kinetic force lifting the massive mercenary off his feet and throwing him backward into the harbor. Chaos erupted. William's remaining men raised their guns, but Dominic's men opened fire from the shadows. The pier turned into a war zone of flashing muzzle bursts and deafening gunfire. "Get down!" Harrison roared, sprinting from cover to tackle me behind a rusted steel bollard. Bullets pinged against the metal, showering us in sparks. Through the chaos, I saw William scrambling, trying to get back into the SUV. He still had the silver hard drive clutched in his hand. He was going to escape. Suddenly, a dark figure dropped from the lower gantry of the crane, landing directly on the hood of the SUV. It was Dominic. He had abandoned his sniper position. William fired wildly through the windshield. Glass shattered. Dominic rolled off the hood, drawing his Sig Sauer. He moved with lethal grace, kicking the driver's side door shut before William could climb in. William stumbled backward, his gun raised. "You think you can take my empire?" he screamed, unhinged. Dominic didn't say a word. He stepped forward into the rain, absorbing a graze to his left arm without breaking stride, and fired twice. Center mass. William Hayes dropped to his knees, the silver hard drive clattering onto the wet asphalt. He stared up at Dominic, blood bubbling past his lips, before collapsing face first into the puddles. Silence fell over the docks, broken only by the sound of the pouring rain and the distant wail of police sirens. I pushed myself up from the ground, ignoring Harrison's protests. I walked on trembling, bare feet across the wet pavement, stepping over the shattered glass and spent shell casings. Dominic stood over William's body, his chest heaving. Blood was dripping down his left arm, staining his white shirt pink in the rain. He looked up as I approached, his fierce, predatory eyes softening instantly. He bent down, picked up the silver hard drive, and held it out to me. "It's yours," he said quietly. $300 million. The keys to the Moreno Empire. You can disappear, Clara. Anywhere in the world. I'll make sure they never find you. I looked at the small piece of metal. It represented everything that had destroyed my life. The greed, the violence, the ghost of a father who had never loved me. I took the drive from his hand. I walked to the edge of the pier, looking down into the churning, black waters of the Mystic River. Without a second thought, I pulled my arm back and threw it as far as I could. It disappeared beneath the waves with a tiny, insignificant splash. I turned back to Dominic. He was staring at me, a look of profound, silent awe on his face. I walked right up to him, pressing my hands against his uninjured chest, feeling the frantic beating of his heart. "I don't want an empire," I whispered, looking up into his eyes, "and I don't want to disappear." Dominic let out a ragged breath. He wrapped his uninjured arm around my waist, pulling me flush against him. The rain washed the blood and dirt from us, leaving only the burning heat of the connection that had forged itself in the fires of the last 48 hours. He leaned down, his lips brushing against mine, a promise, a claim, and a surrender all at once. "You're not going anywhere," he murmured fiercely against my mouth. "You're exactly where you belong." The ledger was gone, resting at the bottom of the Boston harbor, taking my haunted past with it. I was no longer just an invisible waitress, and Dominic Rossi was no longer just a terrifying shadow in a tailored suit. He was the fire that had burned down my fragile old life, only to forge something fiercely unbreakable in its place. In his dangerous, brutal world, I hadn't just survived. I had finally found my home.